Now, the Dragon Knight, who, has been a member for 8 months, hence the cool, shiny diamond logo. We want good characters with good story, intrigue, conflict. And honestly, the whole alliance just needs some internal conflict like the Horde. That's the bit where I like the warm, welcoming feeling of the World of Warcraft right now. But that being said, I am a little bit worried that they could overcorrect. And I suppose my worry with the Horde, right, is that they form this council and then they never, they just don't have drama because they all just hold hands. And maybe actually that's okay for the Horde right now because they have had just constant bullshit. But if that is going to happen, then I think the Alliance needs to have that intrigue. I am completely down with, say, dethroning Anduin. Someone trying to end that royal line because they don't think Anduin is fit to be king after
after his absence, yeah.
After his absence, after his fun little flitting around with Void, the whole the Scarlet Brotherhood wanting to, I think they want to install Turalyon because he's like a good boy from the old days, but like eventually with an eye to ostensibly restoring the Menethil dynasty up in Lordaeron, but with this like child that they have. This is something like 99.9% of WoW players have no idea because it's just in a pamphlet that appeared in BFA. But yeah, there's this group called the Scarlet Brotherhood, and they claim to have the brother of Kalia and Arthas. Mm-hmm. Or Kalia's child? You know what? I actually forget.
I think it was Kalia's child.
Yeah, it was Kalia's child. That was it. So like that's a really good opportunity for intrigue. I would like to see some, proper Night Elf anger, I guess. I would just I'd really like to see more of that. And I'm saying this all as an Alliance player, and it's purely just because I think those are all great opportunities for storytelling. Morrigan Blackthorn, thank you for the £5 super. I would genuinely just like to see unique cultures instead of the fantasy allies versus Warsaw Pact. Yeah. Dissolve factions and make races important again. I think that is exactly what I would like to see. I think it's good if it happens within the context of strong factions. And I mean, bringing up the pact is kind of fun because within, lots of movements who are kind of thinking, we don't exactly want to be a part of this pact. It's not great. So I think if the factions are strong, but then within that you have the races actually trying to kind of fight for their own things, right? Because not every country in the EU gets along perfectly. Not every country in NATO spends 2% of their GDP on defense, and that leads to bristling between the countries. Yeah, I think and I think more things like that. That is a way of harnessing big factions to create more political incentives for all the different groups and different races. I do though more racial content would be great.
Yeah, I think
the Heritage Armor, at least we may actually get a human story that's good, or an orc story that's about being an orc and the history of orcs.
Hopefully. Yeah, and I think for me that comes across as, I guess, wanting to re-examine the factions. Because the factions are a thing that's here's the Alliance Nord. And at the beginning of World of Warcraft, they went, here's why the Alliance exists, here's why the Horde exists. And they haven't really done a good job of re-examining that under any of the contexts in which the game has changed or the world has changed within the game. So I think they do need, they need characters in the world to ask, why does the Horde exist? And specifically, why does the Alliance exist? Mm-hmm. And then, you get the Night Elves going, listen, why are we here? Because it feels like all the times that every time you guys need help, we're there to show up. But when we need help, you don't help us. This is a one-sided affair. We want out. And then whatever happens, and you go, okay, actually, maybe we are stronger together. Maybe the Night Elves just get wrecked again because they secede, and then they go, shit. Well, that'd be a terrible story. But you do the same for the gnomes, the dwarves. you do the same for any of the Alliance race and go, okay, now the Alliance actually has a purpose.
Imagine having neutral humans. Imagine, like, even just that. Imagine a group secedes. Imagine Arathor, like Stromgarde, like they form the Old Kingdom, secede from the Alliance, become neutral with both parties. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Do you see, I mean, just look at all the potential that could be there. And maybe these, humans that have their proud heritage that they have, maybe there's like orcs who kind of look at that and are like, okay, we respect that. And I mean, for them, it could be interesting too, because it would be going back over the water to where they were, initially invaded and were then enslaved after the Second War. And I know that could maybe be a bit of a touchy story, but I think those are the stories that actually can be the most interesting and have the most, real shit in them. And I think when people really adore stories like in FF14, it's because it's touching and real shit.
People also like the side quests they've added in Dragonflight that are very real. People like the Vertistra stuff, and that was heavy enough from a personal perspective. The one with the dragon maw, that's pretty heavy. Like that is literally, oh yeah, this orc clan, we did some horrible things. How do we engage with that? I think that would be also good for, like, even because I'd love to see a world where the human and orc heritage are actually two parts of the same story. And I know it's not going to be this based on like the armor and stuff, but one of the things that would be beautiful to see would be you get to some, maybe like kind of old soldiery vibes, but you get to see the humans go, oh yeah, I remember the time we threw a lot of orcs in camps, that was kind of grim. And then orcs get to go, remember the time we get thrown in camps, that was kind of grim.
Yeah.
But then the humans go, well, I mean, we did have a good reason for throwing you in the camps. You were going around murdering us. And then they go, yeah, to be fair, this kind of was your place, and we came through the portal. And yeah, we were led here under false pretenses. That wasn't very nice of us, but we still, we were following orders, but we still executed them, so it is kind of our problem. And just having like human and orc dialogue around that through a couple of named characters and a couple of fight scenes where someone gets angry and you have to kind of hold them back. Things like that. Even this is the awkward part where you struggle with having class mechanics that are there. But the amount of times it's like, right, what do you do in a fight? You fight someone. You take their HP down. But it'd be nice to have a world where it's like, oh yeah, right. Everyone has CC, you have to CC this. You have to, like, as a druid, as an example, you have to root people so they don't hit each other. Things like that would be really nice if they can find ways to, in the same way they have, like, say they've, like, I can't remember how many mage tower fights they have, but there's so many mage tower fights. And then they sort of split them up and go, well, you 3 DPS have this because you have the same set of mechanics. Doing that for, like, one quest fight that's like, right, you have some form of CC, or if you don't have a CC of, like, a displacement or something, you have to use this enough times to keep them from fighting each other. Just so you get to see a little bit of that, like real actual tension from characters in the world based on the human and orc heritage. Because there's heritage in the sense of the Vrykul, but then there's heritage in the sense of the oldest humans' lived memory, which, like, a modern human heritage would probably be, maybe it wouldn't even be people in the war anymore. It'd be like the Cold War. Or like here it'd be people living through the Troubles, even though younger people haven't like had to experience that very much. That would be the stuff that I think people would really remember. That really remember that experience and go, oh, that had a bit of bite to it. I had to do something that was a bit unusual. And so it's like little moments of creativity I think people actually remember really well.
Yeah, like not every story has to be a big fantasy thing. There can be things happening within a fantasy world that makes that fantasy world feel super real. Which, I mean, I think I would definitely like. Andrew. Superdos, $5. Thank you. And said, as a long-time Alliance player, it's always been my experience from friends joking at me that we're a faction led by Disney princesses. Great take.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, that's it. And
no
it
two ways
is.
to put that, yep.
I think that's why Arathor specifically, so many people are just like super down for that. Absolutely. Mike Steele, super saying Blizzard needs to shake things up with construction instead of destruction too. Retake and rebuild Gilneas via server progression.
I think they'd likely have some of that planned. It's just it'll be a while, I imagine.
It's the kind of thing where if imagine there was just like a Warcraft expansion. That wherein the expansion itself was about rebuilding the world.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Not just rebuilding. Like there would be plenty of political tension. Maybe in my head, this is where you would have some neutral factions of traditionally factioned races appearing. Like that Arathor thing. But even if Blizzard wanted to, revamp Azeroth in an expansion plus 3 patches, you could almost think of a way that you could do that in an expansion with deeply kind of faction rooted and themed narratives. Morrigan, also super 10 quid, thank you, and said, I only really care about the elves because of my Gaelic heritage, but remove that and humans are just fantasy Americans. Horde have more culture, but they should integrate more RPG elements into the creator.
Yeah, fantasy Americans is really, really... Obviously, they're American developers, so you're going to have to expect some of that. But I think Europeans look at that and go, why do Americans think the world started when their country did? Because it definitely didn't. Humans are so interesting in so many different ways. And the fact that they usually have to go, well, it was Night Elves. Night Elves,
did you know that
they're like Night Elves, they're Asian. And you go, oh, Dwarves, they're like closer to Celts in a couple of ways, even though it's a bit...
Do you know that we have running water and electricity in Ireland?
Oh,
we
yeah.
even have the internet.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
But yeah, I think that's it is frustrating when humans end up being the default, because I think I think there's a good reason for it. Humans are included. I remember there was some MMO creator, some relatively popular one, who did a load of interview rounds and was very happy to talk to people, talked about it once and said something along the lines of you need humans because people need to relate to characters, and a lot of people have struggled relating to a character that literally doesn't look like them. And that's, obviously, from that perspective, I think that's ridiculous. To the prospect that someone can't play an elf or a dwarf and go, yeah, 100%. I can totally empathize with this character that looks not like me. I think people are like, I don't know, maybe it's an intellectual capability thing or something.
No, I'd recommend looking up a few points of human history.
Yeah.
Not necessarily history. Looking up points of human current day.
Yeah, I mean in the video game context, obviously. But I think humans have to be kind of milquetoast so people can see the thing on the character select screen that makes their brain go, yeah, that's me, that's home, and click it. But I just think that shouldn't bar them from having stories in that game that are a bit more interesting in terms of their actual history.
Yeah, I want to see more of what makes the human kingdoms actually feel different compared to their points of inspiration. And I guess same goes for everything else, where they kind of just went, what, Native Americans? You're Tauren. Scottish people? You're dwarves. But, I mean, everyone's been doing that with fantasy races since, a pretty long time anyway. Yeah. So it is it's one of those common pitfalls. I think that there's more that they could kind of mine out of that. And I guess another side point to that, that is an interesting one in terms of how it's actually executed in game from Morrigan, who dropped a super and said, they killed the ethnography in their setting. Tolkien made Numenor and Rohan unique physically and culturally in order to not make it shallow. They should have added more unique cultures in BFA. And I guess that is the thing. You look at, say, I don't know, the world George R.R. Martin has created, where Westeros is, more of a kind of like a Europe analog. So most of the people there do, look like Europeans. Obviously, you go south to Dorne, that changes. You go to the Summer Isles, that changes. You go way over to the east to Ashai, that changes. And that's one of those things where, at least and very much unlike the TV show by the end, but you do get a feeling of, oh yes, this is a humongous, extremely vast world, and we're only really getting a small story in its Europe, and that's modeled after European history. And that, I guess that, that is something. With Warcraft, they've very much chosen not to do that. I think a part of the reason is because it's an MMO, and I think their perspective is okay, look, we don't have... Well, I mean, that's basically the thing. It's fantasy Americans. So, it is a big melting pot, rather than, say, the more historical, say, the George Martin side of things.
Yeah, people should come here for a while and try to understand someone who's down the road, and then wonder why the hell, like, why is everyone in the entirety of World of Warcraft speaking common all the time? Why is there no like stories of, oh yeah, here was orders translated to a different military group and it went wrong because the translation was screwed, because for some reason people from, like, say around the Arathi Highlands all write weird. Same language, but they just like have different like ways of writing, and letters got confused and stuff like that, or numbers are written slightly differently. All those like tiny details. And I am mostly thinking about how different humans are 20 minutes down the road here. Like, that's a distance you could walk if you really wanted to. And just unintelligible, honestly. The amount of effort we have to go to for you to understand us is crazy. Not even joking. Taking a little bit of the piss, but generally it's actually it's a serious point that I think is just a little bit. I suppose that's what happens when you have fantasy races, right? You have fantasy races, and then you don't have to do this with humans. You just go, and the humans and the orcs have a problem, instead of going the humans from X and the humans from Y have a problem. But then you get the problem of your game's big enough. You're like, why are all the humans the same? You're like, fuck, I thought we avoided this problem.
Yeah, because then it's like, well, yeah, no, exactly. So it's like, then how do you make the humans look and feel different in a world where, I mean, you know, Spanish person, Swedish person, decent Irish person, right, will all look a wee bit different. But that's not really something that's going to be there in like, I mean, it is something that is there in Warcraft with whatever way you like customize your character, but like there's no lore background to that. But also, if they were going to do a lore background for that, that is like kind of a bit of a minefield. And I don't think they particularly have the setup for all of that in their world just yet. I mean, it's all to say that I think this all comes from a recognition that it is a big fantasy world that actually people can sort of take seriously enough, and that because of that, hey, there could be more depth to some of these things.
Sure could.
Or as ID2K says, just make them fat and drunk, and then they're Kulturans.
Perfect.
Kulturans. Yeah, where's the skinny Kulturans? Remember those that were data mined?